And welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. I'm Todd Starnes in for Rob. Thank you for watching. Over the weekend, 54 people were shot in Chicago, at least 8 people killed. That alone would qualify the Windy City to be classified as a war zone. And that's why President Trump is preparing to conduct major immigration enforcement operations in the Windy City. And as those 50 people were being shot this weekend, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order against the deployment of federal agents in his city.
I'm signing an executive order today that will launch the Protecting Chicago initiative. This order affirms that the Chicago Police Department will not collaborate with military personnel on police patrols or civil immigration enforcement. We will protect our Constitution, we will protect our city, and we will protect our people. We do not want to see tanks in our streets. We do not want to see families ripped apart. We do not want grandmothers thrown into the back of unmarked vans. He is reckless and out of control. He is the biggest threat to our democracy than we've experienced in the history of our country.
Well, during a Labor Day rally today, he told the crowd he would defy the president and defend democracy in Chicago.
Are you prepared to defend this land that was built by slaves, a land that was built by indigenous people, a land that is built by workers? Are you prepared to defend this land? If this president decides to continue to break this Constitution, it's going to be the labor movement that stitches it back together.
I don't know. Sounds a little, what's the vibe I'm looking for? Insurrection-y, maybe? Just a smidge. But as bad as the streets may be in Chicago or Washington, D.C., they are even more dangerous in places like Memphis, Tennessee, and Detroit. According to FBI numbers from last year, those two cities rank as having the highest crime rate per 100,000 people in the country. And by crime, the FBI means murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. Chicago ranks 29th on the FBI's list. So why is the Trump administration putting all of its resources and efforts into bringing law and order to Chicago and D.C., and not places like Memphis or Detroit? That is the question raised by the New York Times today. They published a story titled "Crime Festers in Republican States While Their Troops Patrol Washington." Now, the Times specifically called out Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, wondering why the Republican governor dispatched National Guard troops to Washington instead of Memphis. The Times pointed out the murder rate in Memphis is about twice as high as D.C.'s. So why is Governor Lee turning a blind eye to the hurting citizens of his own state? Now, his office did not respond to questions, and it's no surprise Governor Lee, something of a thin-skinned rhino squish, not exactly cut from the gubernatorial cloth of, say, Ron DeSantis or even Greg Abbott. Now, Jeffrey Butts of the John Jay College of Criminal Justice told the Times that federal resources are not actually being targeted where they would make the most difference. And he said that the Trump administration's actions are not doing anything to improve public safety. Instead, he said it's designed to humiliate political opponents. Yeah, I'm not buying this one at all, folks. We got to push back on this assertion. Look, TV stations in D.C. are actually commending the president's crime crackdown. So are local residents. They say it's safe for the kids to finally play outdoors, not to mention the fact the district's murder rate has cratered.
I feel safer. I do. It doesn't bother me at all. I just feel more military police presence there are. I just feel like I'm more inclined to be downtown more often.
We need order in our city. If you don't have no order, you ain't got no city.
I think it's a good thing because, you know what I'm saying, it's better for the community and safer for the kids, stop the violence.
I enjoy having extra security. I think it's a good thing. I mean, you want to feel safe when you're out and about, especially females.
And while Chicago Mayor Johnson is all but threatening to wage an armed rebellion against federal agents, residents of the Windy City, they're begging President Trump for help.
The National Guard has to come here. If even if it's for a scare tactic. They have to come here. There's no control. There's no law and order.
Today, you hardly see a police car in a neighborhood. It just seems like crime is really out of control right now.
The whole neighborhood is just sick of people coming into the neighborhood and acting like they can just come ravage your stores, take what they want to take, and then they try to make you feel like you're wrong for defending your property.
We still have a problem. We have a problem with illegal guns. We have a high murder rate. We need help with that.
I think that the governor as well as the mayor should be on board with it just so we can get a bit more of security in Chicago the way that we need.
Now, several weeks ago, the president personally told me on my national radio show that he would be taking a look at Memphis, the city of my birth, my hometown, one of the most unique cities in the nation, turned into a war zone thanks to activist judges, a soft-on-crime district attorney, and Democrat lawmakers who say there's really not so much a crime problem as there is a perception problem. The fact is that Memphians, we don't hate Memphis. We hate what our city has become. And I suspect the good people in Detroit and D.C. and Chicago feel the same way about their towns. You see, the one common denominator here is that Democrats control the most violent cities in our nation, every last one of them. The Democrats have ruled our major cities for generations. They are responsible for the crime. They are responsible for the bloodshed. They are responsible for the moral decay and the cultural rot. Now, President Trump, he wants to make our city safe again. The American people know that. And I got to say, I look forward to the day when President Trump is leading a convoy of troops down past Graceland and over to Beale Street looking to put a blue suede boot up the backside of the bad guys. Well, Raymond Lopez is the alderman for the 15th Ward in Chicago, and he joins us now with Mark Vargas, a Chicago resident and the editor of the Illinois Review. Alderman, I want to start with you. More than 50 people shot this weekend, 8 of them killed. Your mayor signing an executive order limiting Chicago authorities from working with the feds. How does this possibly make your city safer?
Well, you know, the irony, Todd, is that he named it for protecting Chicagoans, but he hasn't said one word, not one word, with regards to all of those lives lost so far this Labor Day weekend, with still 6 hours to go. The 50 victims of gun violence that we've seen with still 6 hours to go. You know, his performance is about Donald Trump and only Donald Trump. But what he's done to this point, you know, as a former teacher, he should know better. He has no authority as the mayor of the city of Chicago to compel the federal government to do anything. And he should also be focusing on the perception, which has become reality, that Chicago is unsafe. Our residents want to be protected, and our resources are better utilized chasing down gun and drug and gangbangers than protecting neighborhood icons, which the National Guard could easily do itself.
Mark, your governor, J.B. Pritzker, also refusing help from President Trump. Let's take a listen to this.
Well, National Guard troops, any kind of troops on the streets of an American city don't belong unless there is an insurrection, unless there is truly an emergency. There is not. In secret, they're planning this. Well, it's an invasion with U.S. troops. If they, in fact, do that, it's an attack on the American people by the President of the United States.
All right, 13 consecutive years, Mark. Chicago's had the most homicides, 3 times that of L.A., 5 times New York City, and yet state leaders just will not do anything about it. What do you make of that?
Well, the irony is that Governor Pritzker had no problem deploying the Illinois National Guard during the Democratic National Convention to protect the Democratic Party's wealthiest donors and their VIP delegates, but he won't deploy the National Guard to protect everyday residents, including children and babies. Think about this in perspective. There were more shootings this Labor Day weekend, so far this Labor Day weekend in Chicago, than in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York City combined. And yet Governor Pritzker says that this is a manufactured crisis. 67,000 criminals out on the streets because of no cash bail who missed their court hearing. That's not a manufactured crisis. 1,600 police officers short and 225,000 high priority 911 calls going unanswered. That's not a manufactured crisis. And 90% of violent criminals walking on the streets because they've never been identified or charged, that's not a manufactured crisis. So again, Governor Pritzker has no problem deploying the National Guard to protect his wealthy billionaire friends who were in Chicago for the Democratic Convention, but he won't deploy them to protect everyday residents. Send the National Guard in. It's why no one robs gun shops. It's a deterrent, and residents and visitors need to feel safe again.
Alderman, you're a Democrat. How come your party's not getting this? It seems to me when you look at the polling data here, they see where the people are on this, and yet they're turning a blind eye. Your party's turning a blind eye to this in Chicago. You get it. How come they don't?
My party's been turning a blind eye to many things that are important to everyday Chicagoans, everyday voters. And sadly, public safety shouldn't be a partisan issue. This should be something that we are all concerned about. Democrat, Republican, Independent, I don't care who you are. You want to be able to go to work, come home safe. You want to be able to sit on your front porch without being shot. You want to be able to go to the store without being carjacked. It's a common sense, universal philosophy. And yet my party, my fellow Democrats, have been so secure in that bubble that they exist in that they've forgotten what really matters. And that's going to continue to harm the party's electoral chances in the years to come.
Mark, there were protests around Chicago today. The Labor Day protest sort of morphed into a no troops protest. The mayor leading the chants there. What the hell is wrong with this mayor? I don't get this.
Well, we shouldn't be surprised. Again, Chicago Mayor Johnson has an approval rating of just 6%, the lowest of any mayor in history. But you can't forget, Todd, that he blamed Richard Nixon for Chicago's high crime. He's called Donald Trump a terrorist. And just the other day, while on Morning Joe, he said that the way to solve Chicago's crime crisis is with affordable housing. So this mayor is clearly ill-prepared and doesn't have the competency to secure his residents and to make people feel safe again. And who would have imagined that the Democratic Party would prioritize illegals over law-abiding citizens and criminals over law-abiding citizens? It's just mind-boggling.
All right, gentlemen, we've got to leave it there. I certainly appreciate you both, Alderman Lopez, Mark Vargas. Gentlemen, hope both of you stay safe, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, Israel targets Gaza's largest city, which has been officially declared a dangerous combat zone. Plus, new exclusive reporting gives a closer look into what post-war Gaza looks like. We dive into the details next. Welcome back. I'm Todd Starnes filling in for Rob this evening. Israel has declared Gaza City a dangerous combat zone and has been pounding Gaza's largest city all weekend with airstrikes in preparation for a planned ground offensive against Hamas. Civilians are being warned to leave. The Washington Post claims to have seen one of Trump's internal plans for post-war Gaza, writing that Gaza would turn into a trusteeship administered by the United States for at least 10 years, while it's transformed into a gleaming tourism resort and high-tech manufacturing and technology hub, adding a temporary relocation of all of Gaza's more than 2 million population, either through what it calls voluntary departures to another country or into restricted, secured zones inside the enclave during reconstruction. Well, here to discuss, the Vice President of National Security at the Heritage Foundation, former Deputy National Security Advisor in the Trump administration, Victoria Coates, along with Christian Witten, a Newsmax contributor and former senior advisor in the Trump administration. Victoria, what happens next in Gaza?
Well, Todd, in a funny way, that's entirely up to Hamas. They were the ones who started this war almost 2 years ago. I mean, it felt like through the looking glass last week when we started preparing our 2-year anniversary of October 7th programming at the Heritage Foundation. This has been going on for 2 years. Hamas is the ones who have said over and over again, no to any good deal. They will not let the hostages go, they're going to continue this brutal war that victimizes the Palestinians of Gaza. So I think what you have President Trump doing, as he did in the first term, preparing a plan for a path forward if there are Palestinians who want it. The plan is there. I worked on the first one. I think a lot of the same people are working on the second one. That path is there. This doesn't have to be. And the burden of it isn't on Israel, it's on Hamas.
Christian, ahead of next week's big UN General Assembly meeting in New York City, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, revoking visas of multiple Palestinian officials. They were set to attend. This as Canada, France, the UK said they plan to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN. Israel's not happy about this. Axios reporting the Israelis seriously debating the annexation of parts of the occupied West Bank in retaliation for what they're calling the imminent recognition of Palestine by several Western countries. How does this all play out?
Well, Todd, it's unclear. I think we know what's going to happen at the UN General Assembly. It'll be like every previous one, which is basically a waste of time. People will pay attention to what President Trump says, but that's about it. And I think it is useful what Secretary Rubio did in pouring cold water on this ridiculous hootenanny being negotiated by our supposedly wonderful friends in Western Europe and Australia that really are just going to, by encouraging Palestine, really means encouraging Hamas, encouraging them to hang on, and discouraging the type of solution that President Trump is trying to bring about, that the Israelis are trying to bring about. I mean, when was the last time Europe did anything helpful to useful, or frankly, anything helpful to the United States in the Middle East? After all, it was Britain and France and Germany, again, our wonderful NATO allies, that worked against the Trump administration's maximum sanctions against Iran in the first Trump term. So I think this sort of leads to where we are now, which is a couple of interesting ideas coming from the administration, and I'll bet a lot of Palestinians would like to take that ticket out of Gaza if they could, but not a clear path forward.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Victoria, Greta Thunberg back in the news. She's sailing back to Gaza again with aid, setting sail yesterday from Barcelona. Now, Israel's national security minister planning to present Netanyahu with a plan to detain activists in harsh terrorist-level conditions. You know, the last time she tried this, Israel detained her and made her watch an October 7th video, which she apparently refused to do. Your reaction to all of this?
Well, and they gave her a sandwich too, Todd. No, and actually, there's a little bit of breaking news tonight, which is that there was a bad storm in the Mediterranean, and her ship, which apparently isn't all that seaworthy, has been forced back to Barcelona. So with all apologies to the people of Barcelona that they're getting Greta Thunberg back, I think God has a vote here, and he is not going to allow her to come and make a spectacle of herself. This has nothing to do with the climate, which is her purported issue. She is just simply trying to insert herself into a publicity vehicle. And what it does a disservice to, and this is deadly serious, is to the Palestinian people. She's making them into a prop. They're not anything serious to her. It's just a way for her to get on camera, and it's a disgrace.
Of course. Christian, China, by the way, China's Xi Jinping hosting a summit for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Russian President Putin, the Indian Prime Minister attending. It appeared that Prime Minister Modi was cozying up to China and Russia in the face of these tough negotiations on trade from the president. Reuters putting it like this: China's Xi pushes a new global order, attempting to align with Russia and India against the United States. How does all this play out?
It's a global odor, maybe. You know, it's important to look at the history of the SCO, and it's, as I mentioned earlier, the UN General Assembly being useless. The SCO has been even more useless. Nothing has come out of it. You know, the press made a big deal that Modi and Putin were holding hands, and this notion that the U.S., by putting secondary sanctions on India for buying huge amounts of Russian oil, is going to push India away. But frankly, India has been a very disappointing partner. There's the supposed turning point. There was, in fact, a turning point in the Bush administration with India not becoming a U.S. ally, but sort of ceasing to be this adversary that was ahead of the G77 third world countries. But, you know, the idea that India is being helpful to us against China or helpful with Russia or Iran. Not really the case. That's more wish casting. So, I think like a lot of things happening in the second Trump administration, reality is is revealing itself. And yeah, they had a big summit and nothing's going to come of it.
All right, Victoria, Christian, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on Newsmax tonight.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
All right, federal appeals court rules Trump's tariffs as a misuse of his power. That's next. Welcome back to Rob Schmitt tonight. I'm Todd Starnes, filling in for Rob. President Trump's push on tariffs coming to a screeching halt. A federal appeals court throws a roadblock in the president's way. The court ruling on Friday that Trump, quote, misused his authority when he imposed tariffs under an emergency power statute. The ruling going on to say that only Congress has the power to apply such sweeping measures. The president, though, says he will not back down. Posting on Truth Social, more than $15 trillion will be invested in the USA, a record. Much of this investment is because of tariffs. If a radical left court is allowed to terminate these tariffs, almost all of this investment and much more will be immediately canceled. In many ways, we would become a third world nation with no hope of greatness again. Time is of the essence. Well, joining me now is Tomas Philipson, the former chairman of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Along with him is Tim Descher, the executive director of Unleash Prosperity. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Tomas, to you first, your reaction to the court ruling.
Well, I think it's a very liberal court, apparently, but it's funny. Liberals are always pushing higher taxes. In particular, they love it when companies get hit with higher taxes. But for some reason, tariffs, which is a company tax on foreign companies, is not something they love all of a sudden, obviously, because it's Trump that proposed it. I'm not for tariffs, but I think there's some in general, some very beneficial effects of these trade agreements where the April 2 tariffs were lowered, trading in essentially lower tariffs for non-tariff issues, such as standards being revoked in a country, meaning prohibitively costly standards, which is equivalent to a prohibitively costly tariff. And more importantly, foreign direct investment, which has gone from about $250 billion a year the last decade to now, if the president is correct, 60x that. Now, let's say he's exaggerating, which he's tend to do sometimes. Cut that in half. It's still 30x in terms of foreign direct investment coming in.
Tim, I'm curious to hear from you. President Trump painted a pretty grim future for us if these tariffs are cut off. How much revenue are we talking about losing here?
Well, they projected that we could potentially see revenue of $4 trillion over the next 10 years from these tariffs. And I'll tell you what, given the fiscal outlook that we have currently, $1.6 trillion deficits and, $37 trillion national debt. I mean, there is an argument to be made that this could be a good thing. But I think we got to focus on the growth element of that. Somebody's got to pay for those tariffs. That's going to be either the producers or that's going to be the consumers. So we want to make sure we watch that and not use tariffs as a permanent tax hike, but use them, as Thomas was saying, as a negotiation tactic. But I do think it's interesting, though, if you look at this court decision, it's not really about the tariffs. It's about the president's power. And I think that's a question that we as conservatives needs to grapple with here is how far does emergency authority go? Can you place taxes, essentially, on any country without Congress's say? And that is a question that the courts absolutely need to answer, whether you like the tariffs or not. You have to answer that question. Where does his authority start and end? And should Congress be involved in this?
Right. Tim, I want to stick with you for this next question. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent earlier said the president may declare a national housing emergency in the coming months to address rising prices and dwindling inventory. Now, part of the president's platform was affordability. So besides the rate cuts from the Federal Reserve, what can the president actually do to help these homeowners?
Well, that's going to be a really interesting question. I think that we can see when you open up federal lands a little bit more, maybe you can start building on those, start opening those up for things. But like you said, this is really a local issue. You know, you can't build in New York City, not because of the federal government. You can't build there because of their local zoning policy. You know, you can build in Dayton, Ohio, and you can get a house for $200,000 there, 3-bedroom house for $200,000 there, because they have great zoning rules and family-friendly policies. And so you really have to take this from a local perspective. We want to go bottom up, not top down from Washington out. So we could free up capital, like you said, from the Fed. We can free up federal lands. I like that idea, but I want to make sure that we don't get too involved in picking winners and losers in terms of the federal government with land use.
And Tomas, I want you to weigh in on here as well. What can the president do to help these homeowners who are really struggling right now?
Well, one issue is that with the COVID rates that people got, 2 or 3% mortgages, there's no inventory because people don't want to sell their house, right? But housing is a little unique. So you have low supply caused by these high interest rates that we hiked up pretty quickly, essentially, which is driving up prices. So it's kind of counterintuitive because we basically rate hikes are meant to lower prices. But in this credit-sensitive market, the most credit-sensitive market I think there is, they have opposite effects by lowering supply. People don't want to sell when they're stuck in these low-rate mortgages. So have an offsetting effect of raising prices potentially. I think that's an important component. Once those things are sort of weeded off with ARMs or other things where people have to basically refinance at the higher rates, I think inventory is going to come back up.
All right. Guys, we're going to have to leave it there. Tim, Tomas, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Well, despite pushback from the courts, the president wants to take further action to secure our elections. More next. One of President Trump's campaign promises was to restore faith in our elections and protect election integrity, a goal he has been working on since he returned to the Oval Office. In March, the president signed an order requiring people to show government-issued proof of citizenship in order to register to vote in federal elections. Now, the president currently battling that in court as 2 judges blocked that order, but President Trump is not giving up on election integrity. Trump announcing that he plans to sign an executive order mandating voter ID for all U.S. elections, posting on Truth Social, voter ID must be part of every single vote, no exceptions. I will be doing an executive order to that end. Also, no mail-in voting, except for those that are very ill and the far-away military. Use paper ballots only. Well, joining now is Christina Bobb, a Judicial Watch attorney and podcast host Tudor Dixon. Ladies, good to have you with us. Christina, let's start with you. You actually led the RNC's election integrity program. The judges blocked the president's previous orders on election security. Do you think this time is going to be different?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to rule, but I applaud President Trump on the effort and the fight going forward. The frustrating reality is this could or should easily be able to pass through the House and the Senate, which is what the argument on the other side is that it needs to be legislated, not an executive order. And so I look to the Republican House and Senate and say, well, why aren't you doing this? This is a very simple thing. It's already federal law that you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote in federal election. All this mandate does is require that they verify that, and it's already the law in several states. There's nothing that's really new here. It's just Democrats pushing back on something that is already in the law that they're just looking the other way at. So I place a lot of blame on the Republicans in the House and Senate for not allowing this to easily go through, because it's already the law. There's not a whole lot that's new here. It just makes it easier to enforce the law, and they're not really doing anything with it.
Tudor, look, this has got to be, it's so aggravating to hear that the Republicans are once again standing in the way of something like this. In spite of that, you've got these critics of the president saying, oh, it's a burden. It's a burden to make somebody show an ID, and it could block millions of voters who don't have an ID. Tudor, if you're buying cough syrup at Kroger, you got to show an ID. Everybody's got an ID here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is another part of the genius of what President Trump does is he puts this out there and then you have to see that the Democrats will come out and say, absolutely not, we don't agree with this. And just take Michigan, for example, because if you look at Michigan, we, in the last election, had a Chinese national vote in our election. And Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, who is now running for governor, told everybody, absolutely not, that can never happen. And then it did happen. And all of these emails came out from behind the scenes that she was trying to cover up what else could happen in the election system. It is fallible. This is something that can happen. This is something that, as Christina said, should be a no-brainer for Congress to come out and say we should protect, and certainly on the legislative level, on the state, at the state level, for legislators to say we should protect our right to vote and make sure that if I vote, my vote doesn't get countered by some Chinese national coming in and voting a different way, because then I have lost my vote, and that should be illegal.
Yeah, Christina, I want to switch gears for a moment. A bizarre story out of Fairfax County, Virginia. There is a Democrat superintendent. Her name is Shell Reid. She's exemplifies so many things that are wrong in our education system. This woman here makes more money than the President of the United States, getting paid about $424,000 annually. And now she is requesting that taxpayers fund a security detail that's expected to cost taxpayers almost $140,000. Meanwhile, there are some teachers in the district who can't even afford to stock their classroom with school supplies for the kids. Christina, what do you make of this?
This is shocking, and I saw the piece that you put out on this, and it's just an example of Democrats being in love with themselves, having an inflated sense of self. It's their huge ego. There's absolutely no reason, one, for her to be making that much money, but two, a security detail? What on earth is the threat? Why does she need a security detail other than she wants a chauffeur? I mean, that's apparently, that's one of the benefits of coming with the security details. They drive you around everywhere, which, I would love that too. So I think this is absolutely ludicrous. It's bizarre that she thought it was appropriate to even raise the question, and it just goes to show how out of touch with reality these Democrats are, and they believe that they're entitled to public funding to fund their own personal whims.
Tudor, there's a new Gallup poll out, and 0% of Democrats, 0%, say they are satisfied with the direction of the country under Trump. What does this tell you about the Democrat Party?
I think it's overall just a very depressing place to be. I think they're genuinely upset about their party as well. I mean, they don't have a leader. They can't figure out who their leader would be. Suddenly, Bernie Sanders and his crew are rising to the top, and they still have Gavin Newsom out there fake tweeting Donald Trump tweets. I mean, they really are an entire party that is lost. They don't know where to turn. They obviously, true Democrats are always going to be on the opposite side of Republicans, but this tells me they're on the opposite side of themselves too. They just don't have a path.
Yeah, those tweets were a little cringy, ladies, not going to lie. Christina Bobb, Tudor Dixon, ladies, happy Labor Day. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up, CBS fake news caught again editing out what doesn't fit into their anti-Trump agenda. This time, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem claims they are running cover for a wife-beating suspected MS-13 gang member charged with human trafficking. That's next in News from the Left. Highlight of her career in Hollywood was the Flintstones.
Yeah, when you introduce yourself and saying, hi, I'm from a movie from 1994, that's obviously where she gets her facts. As Brady pointed out, you had a series of gender-confused shooters. You had the Nashville shooting, you had the Lakewood Church shooting, you had the Iowa High School shooting, who all thought they were born into the wrong body. But, I'm going to go with the totally irrelevant, non-true fact that MAGA's been shooting people. That's what she goes with. But, it's pretty sad when your big introduction is, hey, I was in that movie in 1994. Do you remember who I am?
Wow. Brittany, real quick, the New York Times, not much better than Rosie. Check out this headline. What motivated the Minnesota church shooter? We may never know. You've got 30 seconds. Your reaction to that.
Well, I mean, it would, if he had only written it on his gun or something, we might actually know his motive. Oh, wait, he did. This was clearly an anti-Trump, anti-God, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic person. We have an entire manifesto. There is absolutely no secret whatsoever as to this person's motives. But again, this is what the left does, right? They're going to ignore the fact that this was a clearly mentally ill person because they don't want to talk about gender dysphoria. They're too busy praising it and trying to shove it into our schools and our military. And they want to blame guns. Ultimately, they don't want to dig any deeper than to blame firearms and those of us who own them.
All right. We've got to leave it there. Eric, Brittany, guys, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, a heartwarming story of a Green Bay police officer's good deed for a patriotic widow. Stick around. Finally tonight, a touching story out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. A widow who displayed an American flag outside her house to honor her deceased husband, a World War II veteran. He had recently passed away, had her flag stolen. The police department heard what happened. Officer Rob Ackey purchased a new American flag, posted the stars and stripes outside of her home. May God bless those great patriots there at the Green Bay Police Department and the veterans, along with their families. Also, folks, President Trump recently sat down with me for a long-form interview for my latest book. The book, by the way, called Twilight's Last Gleaming, Can America Be Saved? The answer is yes, it can be saved. And my book shows you how. It's available at your favorite bookstore or on Amazon rather. Hope you get a copy. Have a great night, everybody. Finnerty is next.
You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt tonight on Newsmax.